First time worked out fine, so I just want to make sure we're on before we go too much further on this. Come on. There we go. All right, now I see us. First time worked out fine, so I just want to make sure we're. All right, just want to make sure we're on. Okay, so yeah, just made sure that we were good. All right. So, welcome to Bricks and Flicks episode 2. We have Star Wars episode 4, New Hope part 2, because I wasn't fast enough building the Luke Skywalker's X-Wing and got halfway through. I got 2 bags out of 4. So now I have bags number 3 and 4 that I will be putting into play here. And with me I have guest Dizzy Thinque over here. And then I have HTPB right above me here. So the last time we ended up talking about, at least to start with, we ended up talking about how the generational differences with watching this and how it affected us, how it affected what we thought of the movie with our backgrounds. Like my dad, Dizzy Thinque, he was from a serial and Star Trek original series point of view and books with Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and that sort of thing. I was 5 years old when I saw Star Wars, so my take on it was quite different than a 30-year-old. And we also had another friend of mine, ATN, who hadn't even been born yet. My brother, HTPB, we'll just call him Todd just to make things a little easier. Todd actually went to go see Star Wars with my father and my oldest brother before I was able to go see it, so we can find out what his take is on Star Wars the first time he saw it. Todd, take it away.
Well, I think there was a fundamental change in how we used to play as children because of that movie. So lots of times, like if we'd watch Johnny Quest cartoons or something on Saturday morning, you'd be like, "Oh, Johnny," he goes, "You can be Haji." And it's like, "Oh, I wanted to be Johnny," But it wasn't, you weren't Johnny. You were just the person who was assigned Johnny. So you're cool because you're the Johnny. But when we saw Star Wars, it was like, no, I'm Han Solo, and you wanted to be like Han Solo when you played. So you learned how to play in a way that was different than before. Like if I don't know if we were smart enough as kids, even though we played Star Trek and our parents even made us very realistic props to play with, like phasers and communicators, things like that. You actually had an adventure and you were assigned that role, but you didn't act like that person acted. But when you're playing Star Wars for the first time, you're like, I'm Han Solo, I'm this swashbuckling, flippant guy who pretty much runs around thinking he knows what's going on, but is still surprised by things. But and then you've got Luke, who he's trying to get involved and save the world and do other stuff, but we started playing differently. You actually played the role, so it came right about the right age, I guess, for me to switch in the development of how I played. And that was the thing where you could actually, you couldn't be a stormtrooper really, because they didn't have something that they were trying to accomplish. They were just a stormtrooper, but the characters had things that they were doing, and you started playing a role the way that the role existed, instead of just being assigned that, like, you're a red shirt, you're a blue shirt, that kind of thing. It was more of a, you're Han Solo when you're Han Solo. And I think we wanted to play Star Wars kind of characters a lot more. We'd found things like they had a SWAT TV show, M16, that you could buy at the gun toy store. so that it looked like an M16. And whether we broke off the tip that had the sight on the front of it or whether we sawed it off, I don't remember. But right where the barrel would come out, if the barrel went away, that was a stormtrooper blaster rifle right there. I mean, even the carry handle, it made it look like you had a stormtrooper rifle. Like, I got a stormtrooper rifle, you know. So even when we had fireworks, and we wanted to shoot bottle rockets at ourselves, we'd take the stormtrooper rifle and we'd glue a ballpoint pen tube on either side, and we load it up with the rockets so that when you shot somebody with your stormtrooper rifle, you could light and the bottle rockets would shoot out the front of your stormtrooper rifle. You know, it was just like, I don't know. I think the way we played changed with that, and it might have been just the timing of when it came out. But I thought that had an impact in hindsight, looking back. I think we changed the way we played. It wasn't just an assignment of a role where you're that guy. Now you actually played that guy. So
It's kind of interesting because I remember one of the things I liked best about Flash Gordon movies, the serials, was that it countered the image that we'd have to put in our minds as to what the guy looked like when he was doing things. He would charge around the corner and he'd do a thing with his shoulders and his feet, and we as kids would do the Flash Gordon shuffle like he did. It's interesting that this generation stuff translated to you similarly to what Flash Gordon did to us. It was Han walked a particular way, talked a particular way. I don't quite remember. I guess most of the time you were playing together, so I don't remember you pulling any of those stunts that said, he must be Han today. But it's an interesting thought.
All I remember is when we were playing Star Trek, I was always Chekhov or Redshirt. there was too many other kids in the neighborhood, and so I was always.
Well, we were always limited in who had the cool Star Trek phasers. I mean, there were only so many. You take a 1-inch thick plywood or 3/4 inch plywood, and you trace the phaser, and then you cut it out, and then you sand it, and then you paint it to look like a phaser. Everybody else had the cutout. That's what I got. I've got a cutout that's the shape of a phaser, but some of them were painted and had dials on them and stuff. And how many of the main characters are going to get a phaser because they're the main character, and everyone else gets one because you're just another Star Trek player or whatever?
Yeah, the cooler toys went to the main characters. Well, I think what we ended up getting to the last time was Luke and company had just gotten to being across from the Millennium Falcon. But Todd, since you weren't part of the conversation, is there something, any scene in particular that maybe you want to rehash a little bit and tell us your take on some of it?
I'm not sure that I had a aha moment like this was really meaningful to me, But it is funny how when you've got a trilogy, or not a trilogy, but a universe of movies that tries to stay consistent in what they're saying, that there were so many things that change within that. So in context of all the movies, Star Wars Episode 4 is a different conversation than let's talk Star Wars Episode 4 like when it came out and what it had to say and what it. So some of the scenes and how we developed what we thought about what was going on and how we made sense of the new things we learned as we learned them. There were stages in how you went and how versed you were in what was happening so that you could have an intelligent conversation of, well, this is happening because of that. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, But now in hindsight, knowing it all, you see all the different inconsistencies. So the inconsistencies of the Tusken Raiders, if you've got a pod race going on and you can pick off a pod racer with a rifle at like 1,000 yards away, that's too precise for Tusken Raiders. Only a stormtrooper could be that precise. I'm like, I don't know that there is a blaster with the sight profile of a short, stubby M14 or something that's going to shoot 1,000 yards and hit anything. But you got this big, long squirrel rifle that they look like in the Tusken Raiders, and they're picking off speeders as they go by in future movies, and so they try to make it make sense when they explain, oh, well, that couldn't have been Tusken Raiders because of this. And it's like, but then later they screw it up by giving them the accuracy, and the stormtroopers never can hit anything. I mean, the only time a stormtrooper had any accuracy was in Spaceballs when they hit the Daphne's hair, and it's like, my hair. That was a really good close shot. That was closer than any stormtrooper ever got in a Star Wars movie.
Right.
But in the beginning, I mean, when they're attacking Leia's ship, a whole lot of rebels got hit in the chest with laser blasts. So, like, I don't know about you, but when you're head to head and you're pointing at something, and something's pointing at you back, and you hit them in the chest and he doesn't, that's kind of like a standoff in the street, like a duel. And you were better, and the stormtroopers killed a lot of rebels. The rebels were sitting here like this, waiting for the stormtroopers to walk through the door, and yet a whole bunch of rebels got hit with blaster fire. So the consistency of what they did later, where they said, oh, it's just another stormtrooper. Well, they were genetically bred later to be the soldiers they were, and it seems very select when you've got Phasma talking about well, this one was a bad batch, but the rest of them are still good, I don't know. It's just so in and of itself, you could talk about Star Wars Episode 4 as if it was the only one that existed, because at the time it is the only one that existed. But now you've got the whole realm of all the movies to put it into context, and that changes your discussion. So, do you suspend what you know in order to talk about how it made you feel at the time? That's a great way to talk about things. But it's hard to turn off the stuff you know about the rest as well.
That's where I have a slight advantage, that I didn't play that stuff from day to day. I wasn't memorizing the phraseology to the point where something would remind me of, and I would make the quotation that covered that. It was something you kids were doing that I wasn't. So it's almost easier for me to talk about it as if it were a one of a kind. And how did I react to it? I still kind of react to it that way. There are some things that amaze me. You're talking about the blaster accuracy. When they came into the detention cell, the one R2 and 3PO were they were nonchalant about being attacked by a bunch of stormtroopers. As soon as the door opened, blasters started going, and some guys were flying forward after being shot. So in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what's the power of this hand tool he just shot the sucker with, because instead of going backwards and slamming into the far wall, he actually flew forward, as if he were heading that way, and the blast just killed him and he didn't stop his forward momentum. So I said, well, what is the power of this sucker? So there are visual things they may have decided later, make sure you know what you're doing in this scene so it looks accurate. But one of the things I noticed then, that the one guy that was left there on the floor, it got him out of the picture easier when the stormtroopers came and opened up the door later. He was, take care of him. He wasn't a main thing you had to step over in the scene. That's some of the kind of things that you do when you block out a scene on the stage. You got to do the same kind of thing depending on where the cameras are aiming and where the people are running and so on. And you don't plan that. It looks stupid or you make mistakes. So it may be that the guy falling forward was doing what he had to do because you didn't want him prominently stepped over for the next 5 minutes in the scenes. It's just something I noticed again, watching.
Well, it is interesting that all the Star Wars movies always have a path for the people to walk, regardless how many bodies pile up. Like if you play one of the original Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War games, you have a setting where you can turn on the dead bodies will stay there, or you can turn it off so that there's some indication that there was a battle there. But when you leave it there so that everyone you shot, you end up taking a defensive position. Now there are piles of bad guy bodies everywhere, and like it's like some of uh, the scenes like there was one Theron, you said the guy who plays Paul Atreides in the new Dune, and I don't know if it's called The King. There's a movie that he's in that you haven't seen yet.
Chalamet, yeah.
So the battle scenes, they're like waiting in bodies, and maybe they'll die and maybe they won't, but they're not going to fight anyone else until they get out of this pile of bodies. It was more realistic, but in all the Star Wars movies, even though a lot of people are getting shot, it's not like the gore of a death scene afterwards when everyone's dead, and it's like we're not sure how many of them are alive. And he goes, we need to find out whether they're pretending or whether they're dead. And it's like try the Sweet Caroline, and the dead bodies go dun dun dun. It's like, oh, there's one, and you kill them. There's the piles of bodies. There just aren't any in Star Wars like that. I mean, there's a little bit in the beginning with the rebels when they're laying there and they've been shot and blasted and supposedly killed almost instantaneously. Yet one of the rebel guys is like this, laying there like, oh, like I died slowly, or and they had to step around some of them. But it's interesting that, I mean, you can have an entire battle and later on in like Clone Wars and stuff in the arena where all the lightsabers are everywhere and people are coming around in ships and taking people out and blasting everybody. There's not like a pile of bodies or anything to walk around. It's just very neat and tidy that you can always find a way to walk.
So it could be somewhat contributed to the author's license as to how he wants the scene portrayed and the ease of the description of what's going on, or the ease of the flow of the story without having to slow somebody down with saying, where'd they put all those guys? I had the feeling that there were an awful lot of guys that died and got no specific credit at all when the reward came for Han and Luke. That maybe the age he was aiming it toward wasn't to be as concerned with the dying end of it as much as an end to moving the scene along. The good guys and the bad guys sorted themselves out as you went, but you didn't worry about having to drag them out of the scene.
Hey, Eric Sedge. Saw you come on a little earlier. Conversation was moving, so I didn't say anything. But hey, welcome. Thanks for showing up. And if you have any questions, actually, or any comments, feel free to text, and I'll throw them in as quickly as possible. All right. Sorry, guys.
No sweat.
I think to your point on the what was it? Who got recognition? Something that is interesting is, yes, that he didn't focus at all on the death, but he also didn't focus on the dog, Chewie. Han's best friend, who even leans on. I don't know if anybody's ever done this with a dog, where your dog is kind of your best friend. He'll be on you, cuddling up with you, or maybe you even use the dog as a pillow behind you as you're laying on the floor watching TV or whatever. Han actually has a scene when they first get into the Death Star, and they're all together, and he says, Chewie ends up growling and says, right as Obi-Wan's leaving the
Where did
room.
you dig up that old fossil?
What's that?
Where did you dig up that old fossil?
Yeah, it leans back. He leans back on Chewie, and it's an interesting motion because it's not like he leans backward. It's, I'm familiar with this person. This person is my best friend, and he leans back. Hey, House of Moth, how's it going? He leans back and he's just gets comfortable against Chewie and says, "Where did you dig up that old fossil?" And it's an interesting thing, but here at the end, we don't at all recognize that Chewie was right there during all of it. How come he didn't get a medal? He's just as sentient as the others. He just can't speak English or whatever the galactic standard would be. But it is an interesting thing that only Han and Luke were the ones that got the medals, and as you had mentioned, Dad, that they didn't really focus too much on the death of hundreds of rebels over the course of the movie
To get them to that point.
To get them to that point, yeah.
But I also, it's interesting, the picture they have of these various creatures. It was amazing to me that Han's stepping over Jabba, and his last comment to Jabba for not pushing 20%, but to drop it to 15. His comment was, "Yeah, Jabba, you're a wonderful human being." Now you can take that with a grain of salt, saying, yeah, what he's saying is, yeah, if you compare to a human being, you're a pile of whatever. Or he was saying, yeah, he qualifies as much as anybody else, and telling anybody that he's a wonderful human being has really got to be tongue in cheek. How do I get it back out of my cheek as it's stuck in so far? But how do you qualify some of these guys in the first time you see this universe? Are they humans, subhumans, better than humans? Are they good guys, bad guys? Your mind is racing to put them all in the right category and know who you can trust and who you can't. Why the guy acts this way or why he doesn't. I watched 3PO as one of the faultiest persons I ever saw. Does that make him a human being? Well, I'm basing it on the fact that he acts like a frightened human. So you look at R2, that little clump of metal seems to be the most handy Swiss Army knife that's available to anybody. Yeah, you just plug himself in and off they go. They figured out what's going on. That's a pretty technical piece of machinery rolling around in their midst to be just a tool. But in fact, he's pretty well taken care of as far as the story is concerned. If it weren't for him, there'd been a lot of things that didn't come out right. So how do you qualify these beings into the right categories is the first time you look at it, this is what you're confronted with. The first time, repeating what I said, the first part one, the guys in white were firing and they were the bad guys. But all of a sudden, the guy coming in that's leading them is wearing black. It ain't going to be easy as those old cowboy movies. The guys with the white hats are good guys. The guys with the black hats were the bad guys. So from the beginning of the movie, you had to start qualifying. This is an altogether different place. Who is what to whom, and who is lying and who isn't lying, and who has the power to do what the power of the job requires. It seemed...
Well,
it seems. I'm sorry. It seems as though they're establishing ways to behave and which ones get rewarded in the end, and which ones are typical of the way people behave that aren't going to get the reward. You know, you've got this archetypal, this rogue hero, like Han Solo, that doesn't necessarily follow the rules, but he's the person that has the situational awareness of what's happening and how to work around the things to get things happening. To even when he dumps his cargo, it's like sometimes you got to dump your cargo, otherwise you're one of the ones who doesn't get a medal in the end. You know, if you want to be one of those guys that held on to his cargo and didn't get a medal, then you can be one of them. But it's in the end, the ones that represented the behavior, which is something to strive for, are the ones who got the medals. So Han and his the place, according to John, in, uh, in accordance with Peterson's thought about the yin and the yang and stuff, and how people do it, the proper way to be is on the center between the two, 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You got all the benefits of tradition and all of the knowledge and the passed down wisdom of the ages, but the only way to win is to go and slay the dragon. You know, you have to go out into the unknown in order to win the trophy and win the prize, you know. And so Han Solo's that kind of thing. And the other one is the hero like Luke, who's naive and doesn't understand how he fits in the world, and he's a whiner and he doesn't know what to do, but he has to go out and do something bold and accomplish something. And he goes, well, we got to go after her. He goes, well, after who? What are you talking about? The princess. She's here. That's what you do. You go rescue the princess from the dragon. That's what heroes do, you know. And when in the end, when you get your award, the hero who went out to rescue the princess, she obviously gets one. He was also the one that slayed the dragon and blew up the Death Star. And you got this other guy who none of it would have happened if it wasn't for him and the way he acts. That must be a good way to act. So those are the two that got the medal, you know. And even though that Chewie was along for the ride and he was a good guy, there were a lot of good guys along for the ride. But what are you trying to tell people? I'm trying to tell people that you act like this, you're going to be the hero in the end. You act like this, you're going to be the hero in the end. And they're slightly different, but those are both hero paths, and the heroes get the trophies. You know, I don't want to jump in front of the scene that didn't happen yet, but it's the interesting thing about I don't know how familiar you are with people getting medals and awards at the ends of wars. Like, the French are particularly good at having the very good medal piece is very intricate, and they'll be like, ooh, look at that. He's got a lot of Napoleon ones, and he's got a lot of cool stuff. But it struck me that the ribbons were pathetically drab. You know, here's this olive drab army ribbon with a big gold medal on it. So if it's a gold medal, where's the blue ribbon? You know, where's the thing that says, look what I got around my neck? I got big red stripes with a couple blue stripes and maybe some stars on it. And look, there's a medal there because this is an important thing. So it gets a fancy ribbon. And they got this like olive drab army thing. Now, when they're looking at the stage and everyone's standing there afterwards, you're like, Luke's got a colorful jacket on and Han's kind of colorful and it looks good. And there's this big gold bullseye on each one. So you know those are the heroes because they got the gold bullseye. But I never saw a ribbon on a medal as terrible as a olive drab army green ribbon for a medal that's, hey, you saved the universe. Here's this gold medal on this. Well, we had string, so here's the string that has the medal on it. I thought that was funny. Didn't mean to jump to the trophy scene, but sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. It's all good. You had mentioned something, Dad. What about the droids and R2 actually being a quintessential tool rather than he's actually the one who knows everything throughout the entire series, whether you count the last 3 movies or not. He's actually the one that is the most coherent and the most understanding of the situations that they're in. Yet he is not at all recognized other than, oh, look, we put him back together. Good. Awesome. He looks good next to C-3PO. But it is interesting that that we start out with Lucas kind of giving us the human perspective through the droids rather than through the actual heroic characters that Todd, you were mentioning the archetypal heroic characters that the audience, we are actually the droids. We're the ones following along, enjoying what's going on because we're watching it, but we don't have a lot of say in what's going on. But it's interesting because we're more C-3PO, I guess, than R2. But it's interesting that R2 actually is the one that is in the know, like us when we figured out what the story is and where it's going. We're like, all right, yeah, we know what's going on. Well, R2 was like that the whole time, so it's like we start out as being the clueless C-3PO, and we end up by the end of the series of watching these movies, we end up being the R2.
Well, there's some depth there in what you're saying, because
Well,
not
geez, I hope
only
so.
no, I mean it can be articulated even further into what you're saying, in that we weren't necessarily C3PO, we were between C3PO and R2D2. Between C3PO, he wasn't sure what was going on. He was confused with everything. And he was like, oh, we're going to die. Oh, it's terrible. And that's not the way to go. R2D2 knew what had to be done. It's like, well, we're going to crash if I don't fix this hyperdrive. So I'll go and fix a hyperdrive. Okay, hyperdrive's fixed. Keep doing what you're doing. And he knew what was happening. C3PO didn't know what was happening. C3PO took the wrong approach. R2D2 knew what he had to do. And somewhere in there, you're learning what's going on because you don't know what's going on like C3PO, but you're seeing this is in every moment, this is what you do to get through that moment. It's one knock at a time. You can't win the war or whatever, but you need to make progress towards the winning of the war, and that's where R2D2 makes the progress. And we're gaining situational awareness as we go because we're clueless like C3. The way to do it is to be somewhere between C3PO and R2D2.
And it flows in with Lucas's episodical type of approach for how you move the information along. In the old black and white serials, you would get asked 2 or 3 questions. Will they survive? And they project what might be happening. The car goes over the cliff and it explodes. Well, in this, we're not given the picture of the car going over the cliff. We're kind of left with the questions in our mind. Where do you go from here? What's going to happen next? And bang, that's the end of the scene, and you go to the next scene, and you pick up other pieces. And you're right, the information comes incrementally, and depending on how we're focusing, we may learn lessons from 3PO or R2 or not, but if that's his method of bringing information to us, we got to be paying attention.
It's interesting that the way they do the storyboards in order to get through the scenes. By the time you're done, that chapter was a storyboard on this is what's going to happen in this one, and it doesn't actually make you feel like you're crawling along where you need to go to get to where you're going. It's a scene in itself, and this is how that scene accomplished. And now we switch to, and here they are looking at the hangar bay, and there's the Millennium Falcon. It's like, oh yeah, there it is, but how do we get there? It's the next thing, the next storyboard, and how we're going to get there are the chapters, like your serials, like but you not necessarily it's not a cliffhanger it's a cliffhanger of I can't wait to find out how we get to the winning at the end. It's I can't wait to find out what's going to happen next. You know what I mean? Like the cliffhangers weren't cliffhangers like, I wonder if the Lone Ranger will ever win against bad guys and it'll be a happy West. It's not. It's like, will the Lone Ranger survive being buried up to his neck in an anthill? It's that kind of a cliffhanger. It wasn't a cliffhanger of whether or not all this is for nothing and some hero who thinks he's going to save the West, So I don't know. Maybe I'm babbling. I have no idea. Probably.
Well, it was a pretty late night for us.
It was.
It is the problem that you face. And I said I have an easier time of fitting my role in this conversation because every time I look at it, it brings me back to the point where I got to see it again as if I saw it the first time. Well, I remember that because it was really a significant thing seeing it the first time. The rest of them it didn't have the same effect on my mind. I thought it was excellently done in the way it handled poking you along down the road. And when your questions might have been like, but you weren't supposed to be keeping track of so many of those questions. I just looked at my notes here. When the stormtroopers were entering the docking bay for the Millennium Falcon, at they were armed, but when they were looking for the droids in Mos Eisley, the guy that was in charge of the squad says, "All right, men, load your weapons. You're not going to do too well in the old West Street if your weapon is not loaded." What the Sam Hill kind of equipment do they have that suddenly says, okay, now's the time to load? And if the idiot following this leader hadn't thought about following orders, would he have ever loaded his device before he broke in the door?
That part always made me wonder too. It's like, come on, Lucas, you don't need to pull us along quite that hard. And for the most part, I'm quite happy with the way that Lucas tells the story. But yeah, there's a couple of lines that are, I guess, sophomoric as far as why is it in the script. You don't have to throw in that much of a lead in. Come on, guys, we gotta. I mean, there could have been something else, fall in line or something more military than, I mean, lock and load works fine if that's what your weapons actually are needing, but blasters don't really need a lock and load. Is hopefully they're already ready, considering they're at attention. They're
well, if the scene requires that these guys be in pursuit, maybe that was a quick and dirty way of saying what the conversation might have been as they went to the door. The guy with a funny snoot talking in a language you don't understand. Next thing you know, the guy's telling his buddies to load the guns and crash the door. Sometimes those things happen in there that leave you wondering after the fact what you might have divined in seeing and hearing what was that's done. When they get caught in a tractor beam and Alderon's a bunch of busted up rock, Obi-Wan says it's an Imperial fighter before it appeared on Han's radar, whatever it was. And he also says it's short range, like it can't go very far on its own. Then they start to realize that's not a moon out there, that's a space station. There's no magnifying lens in front of Obi-Wan. He's picking it up as a part of the Force use. So it saves a lot of time if you get the information from the right guy. But after a while, you're thinking about, wow, how powerful is this guy? Says he not only waved and says, these are not the droids you're looking for. This kind of stuff was going on all the time, and he wasn't making a big noise about it. It was just matter of fact. So he already understood where he was going, knew what he was going to do, essentially, when he met up with Darth Vader. We didn't. In the background, his character is a lot more mysterious than we give him credit for.
Well, when he was fighting Darth Vader and Luke notices him and goes, Ben? Like that. That's the point where Luke shifts from being a lost boy who's in a world bigger than he understands and doesn't really know what to do, although in certain circumstances that we talked about, like, well, of course we got to save the princess, there's some micro things there. But when it becomes a point where he is going to now be a main character that will make things happen in the rebellion from now on, it's, well, I'm going to have to die in front of him to push him into the man he's going to be. So he looks and he goes, I know what to do. Not that I'm going to become more powerful when you strike me down, so I can go be with Qui-Gon Jinn in the afterlife. The people can commune with him. It was this is what's going to make Luke the person that he will be for the rest of his life. It's going to be someone who's going to be that affected by the loss of who he had now come to find as the only father figure he had left, because he was obviously not a really big fan of Uncle Owen, even though it was horrible that he's no longer in his life and he's watching the smoldering bodies like, oh my God, those are the people that was my whole world, really. And then it becomes Obi-Wan becomes his only world, and Obi-Wan's like, all right, Luke, Ben, is that you? Is this where this is going? And he gives him the little grin, like, this is what's got to happen. And he goes, go ahead and strike me down so that Luke can become the hero that he'll always be, you know. And that was, I think, the moment where Luke transitions into the hero of the story from that point on in the trilogy. And
Well, the whole mystique of the Force comes on and manifests itself at various times in the two major characters. Because the other one I was looking at was with Darth Vader. When he was being confronted by the powers that be in the control room of the Death Star, he says the Death Star is inconsequential compared to the Force. Everybody in that room thought this Death Star was the answer to everything. It was a planet killer. And yet here's this crazy old guy in black saying that the Force has got a lot more potential than this Death Star does. And a little later, he's standing there saying, I sense something. It's a presence that I have not felt since, and he leaves it hanging. So he felt a presence on the Death Star. He didn't say, I just walked past this guy and he smelled like he needed a shave or a shower or something.
Or had Limburger for lunch.
There's something going on here, and I know I know that, and he leaves it hanging, so we don't quite know what he sensed. But the Force becomes the character periodically that drives your assessment of who these people are and where are they going to go in regard to it.
well, it's funny that maybe the tragedy of the Darth Vader story, where he was more in tune with the Force than the Jedi were, who were lost and blinders on, following what they thought was the essence of the Force when it was really best practices of a Jedi, and they lost their whole way because they were too busy worried about the best practices of the Jedi. And they had the stink of the Jedi are no longer in tune with the Force anymore. You know, they can't even sense what the dark side's doing because they're just lost in their religious practices instead of actually being a follower of the Force. And Darth Vader was the follower of the Force more than they ever were. And it's like I felt a presence I haven't felt. Like, I smell Jedi stench, you know, the stench of people who follow stupid rules and don't understand what's really happening. They're just blind followers of their religion. I feel a presence I haven't felt since. I hate that taste. You know, I think there's a Jedi on board. You know,
He felt a tremor in the Force. The last time he felt it was in the presence of my old master. A tremor. Okay. He felt a presence, and now he's describing it as a tremor, something out there.
well, if he's in tune with the Force more than anyone else, then the Jedi are a disruption to the flow of the Force. If the story's about Darth Vader, if the story's about his path and him being more in tune with the Force than even the good Jedi, then the tremor is a tremor that the Chosen One, who's following the Chosen One's path closer, even if he's on the evil dark side. I mean, the light side, the dark side, the whole Star Wars universe kind of is wishy-washy about whether or not all dark Jedi are as evil as the Jedi portray them to be. But No, I don't know if I'm losing my train of thought, but you know what I'm saying.
He's the spider in the web of the Force who feels the tremor of someone coming into his area. He was using the Force to warn him that there was something going on. He's the bad guy, so his particular sensitivities are aimed to keeping him going as the bad guy and protecting him. Whereas he may have been a little bit naive in understanding what it meant when his old master decided to cut out and leave nothing but a pile of rags in the middle of the floor that he could kick his boot at. What the Sam Hill's going on here? It was interesting.
Yeah, because it definitely shows that Darth did not know anything about the what just happened. Normally I strike somebody down. Of course, we're only looking at this particular movie, but if we had been looking at Episode 3, I mean, he chops down 30 children and countless Jedi. This hasn't happened yet, and in this movie, without even looking back at his past, you can assume that he's killed a lot of people with a lightsaber, and he definitely is intrigued by the fact that how come he disappeared? And he's kicking the robe, going, "Wait a second, what the hell's going on here? There's no body." He doesn't say anything, but then again, we're not really following Darth Vader's story or perspective on this particular point. But you're right. What the hell just happened here?
Maybe he sensed what Obi-Wan knew is that Obi-Wan was coming to a culmination point. You know, he had
do
to
you
be.
think that, or do you think that maybe he's just confused as that he's like, wow, I really don't know what's going on. This is a power I've never even conceived of.
Tarkin told him he don't let him escape, and his response was escape is not his plan. I must face him alone.
So now Darth has got to figure out, well, wait, if he disappeared, if escape wasn't part of his plan, then what was all this? How come he disappeared? Crap. How come he disappeared? And, was that part of the plan then? So,
well, Obi-Wan spoke earlier about my path is a different path than yours. His path was the path to what the Force wanted to have happen, which was to drive Luke to the to become who he was going to become. And he'd been communing the whole time on Tatooine in the light of all the other movies with Qui-Gon or with the Force or whatever. He was more in line with what he was about to join, and he knew that his path in the saga was about to be over. So not only was he finishing what he had to do, and then his part was over, but it was also now I'm getting lost in my train of thought. I think I said what I meant to say, and now I'm not trying to figure out why I don't have the conclusions because I think I already said it. I don't know. Did I leave you hanging with an idea?
I think that the process of understanding how the Force for Darth Vader was different from the Force was for Obi-Wan, and is yet to be explained to us as to what the benefits or the disadvantages are or whatever. And these are two very glaring examples of how two major characters are caught up in the abilities aided and abetted by the Force. As I said, it's a major character who is revealed in the course of the movies. Not necessarily, you're not supposed to understand everything that's being said about the Force this time. He's throwing newspaper headlines out with a little bit of subtitles here and there for you to get some inside thoughts about it, but he isn't writing the third or fourth page articles that are going to drag you into the gory details. He's given you enough to let your imagination go with it.
Well, I think the central characters in the Force storyline of the who's in line with what the Force, the will of the Force, whatever. It seems that if you are going to be closer to the transition between good and evil and the yin yang kind of symbol, the main characters are the ones that are closest to that line. So Darth Vader is very close to the line, but he's on the dark side of it. Obi-Wan is very close to the line, but he's on the right side of it. You know, Luke's going to be one of those people that's very close to there, and he's either going to ride the line or it's a story about Darth Vader. It's not a story about Luke, but he's one of those characters that's going to be very close to the transition between the good side and the light side. And he knows that his father, when he goes to rescue him in Return of the Jedi, that he's there close to the line. It's a very short step for him to come back from your side of the line to this side of the line, but they're still both very close to the core of where you're supposed to be, not on the fringe of that, but on the transition line between traditional and liberal, I guess. I don't know what a good word in this particular part of our conversation would be to describe it, but the right place to be is partway in each, you know, and making things happen, not being bogged down by tradition and bogged down by
Dogma.
dogma, but moving forward in light of tradition and in light of everything you've learned and all your wisdom. You still have to move forward, but you can't do it if you're only on the light side. You got to be on that line or just over the line. You know, I like the idea that the entire saga is really about Darth Vader, and I think they downplayed that a little bit. Instead, no, Luke did save him. Oh, he is good. So that, yay, the good wins, because good's supposed to win. It's like, maybe that line between good and bad is the right answer, and
Well,
the
see,
good winning.
that's where the Return of the Jedi would definitely come into its own in discussion, because you're right. Luke did not beat the Emperor. It was definitely Anakin or Darth that actually beat the Emperor. In the end, Luke was about to die, so it was the redemption of Darth that saved the day. So yes, it is. The first 6 are all about Darth. If we
So
ignore the
here's
fact
the
the final 3 actually happened, then this 6 stories is great and all about Darth.
Well, so here's the tragedy of Darth Vader then. Yes, he was just over the line on the light side, but situation and circumstance and um, the way he was tempted by the dark side and all that brought him over to a place where he was stuck on the other side, even though he was meant to be just a little bit to the right of the line instead of to the left of the line. And so that Luke was right about, but it wasn't so much that the good won in the end necessarily, but that he was returned to the part of that view that he should have been on, which is just over the right. You know, Darth Vader should have been, if the Jedi weren't so far to the side that was nowhere near the line of transition between what you should do and what you shouldn't do. The Jedi were so far over there that it caused him to have to end up being slightly on the other side because they were so lost. You know what I'm saying? I think Darth Vader's natural place was just over the right onto the good side, but circumstances and the tragedy of this happened and him trying to navigate being close to that edge between the two, that he couldn't go through that path with anyone else because there was no one else who was on that edge. They were all one side or the other, and he was stuck there in the middle, being the only guy who was really the true representative of what the Force wanted to happen. He was closer to that than anybody else. So it's a tragedy that he did evil things and got kicked over to the other side, but it was the tragedy that it was his tragedy. Yes, in the end, he came over to back to where he belonged, but it didn't mean that he was the bad guy of the whole saga. He wasn't. He was the tragic hero of the whole saga, who was more in line with the Force than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, when we left off last time, in my review of the movie, seemed to be like, well, let's go through what's left in order of what kind of pictures were left to be shown to us and what our responses were to them. and I had a list that wasn't quite
I
in
got
order, but
I got a helper.
you got a helper in the scene. So
Don't show your butt. You can't show your butt.
when you get back, Obi-Wan disappears in a pile of
Oops,
clothes.
lost you.
They back the Millennium Falcon out of the Death Star, turn it around and fly off into nowhere. And my question was, the same thing happens when you get the X-Wings coming out of the hangar. Is there no consequence at all in the propulsion system having to be doing some activity? The Millennium Falcon backed out of the Death Star, turned around, and then shot off into the... Nobody got knocked down by the propulsion system. The X-Wings start up out of the hangar. They float up in the air a little bit and kind of maneuver around, and nobody's getting knocked down by side blast or anything like that nature. You got to think, wow, this isn't an automobile they're driving. This is something with a different kind of a motive force.
I'm sorry,
They
I
poured
lost
out of
audio.
the
I
Death
lost
Star
audio
and
in the middle of that. You were talking about the escaping and the turrets, the gun turrets. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I said when they were escaping, nobody got hurt at all by the fact that the Millennium Falcon was backing up out of the Death Star, turning around and then shooting off at the distance. The same as when the X-Wings were getting ready to fly toward their target, they were floating up off the hangar deck there, and people are still moving around and some were being disconnected, but it wasn't knocking anybody down by the blast. This is a convenient motive ability of the machine. Kind of surprised me. Leaves you a question. Well, I wonder if they're going to get into how that happens. One of the things that kind of disturbed me then, after they're escaping the Death Star and they're taking off, the comment was, "We're coming up on the sentry ships." What sentry ships? The first time they came on the Death Star, they thought it was a faraway moon, and they had no way of knowing why that craft was out there without a home base, that in fact the Death Star was a home base. It was, now they're moving away from the Death Star and they run into sentry ships. Where the Sam Hill were they the first time?
Yeah,
And they caught up and
are they just referring? Are they just referring to the fact that they saw a ship before? Oh, now we understand it must be a sentry ship, so therefore we have to get past them in order to get out.
All bases have sentries.
Of course.
Well, it's interesting that if the sentry ship is supposed to be doing something out there, one of the best things it could do is run like hell. Because it was running back to the Death Star to get away from whatever it was that the Millennium Falcon might bring as a danger.
So here, let's go into some space physics here, I guess, some Star Wars space physics. When the Death Star blows up or tries to blow up the Rebel base, it's in orbit around a bigger planet, but when it's just outside Alderaan, it's in orbit of something, maybe a star, or maybe it's traveling through space like the planet is traveling through space, but it's definitely not in orbit around the planet. You blow up that planet and there's like debris everywhere in the whole thing. But interesting that there was nothing but that one ship coming back, and there weren't sentry ships, but if you just blew up a planet and there isn't anything to contain that blast and where all that debris of the planet goes, it's a good thing to pull in all your sentry ships, or you're going to have a bunch of sentry ships running into an asteroid field that you just created.
Yeah.
So maybe there aren't any sentry ships because you just blew up a planet. You may not realize that's why they're not there, but they realize they were after the fact, and maybe they may not have even thought of it. But it seems logical that you could make that argument that there was only a couple ships out there, or maybe one, and they saw it because it was headed to the Death Star, because there are not a lot of ships in the area when you're going to explode a planet that creates asteroid fields,
Well, the Death Star's transportation by itself was a mystery. You see
Yes,
this
but it does go
ball.
places. I mean, they set a course for Alderaan and stuff.
Yeah.
And after Alderaan's blown up, it's like, hey, let's hang out in this asteroid field of blown up Alderaan, where, it's not, it's like, no, that was a mining accident. There is no like Death Star. That's not the story we're going with. Once they blew up Alderaan, presumably the Death Star went somewhere else. And while it's going somewhere else, now it has sentries again. Now it's like a deployed like aircraft carrier and it's got sentries,
Yeah. But of the Death Star in its motion, no matter where it was, whether it went into orbit around the planet and waiting for the rebels' uh, planet to come out of the hidden side of the planet they're in orbit toward. But this thing is like a ball moving, and it looks static in the picture. It's got an up and downs established, and it's moving away through space, and it doesn't show any jet blast that says, well, it's adjust our orbit just a little bit. What is propelling this thing forward and keeping it so level and controlled with those millions of guys that must be in that big thing?
Yeah, they clearly didn't have warp. The Death Star didn't warp to where it was going. It actually went
Yeah.
places and how long.
Well,
And
I guess
in
the
its
question
own
is, are
local
you sure it
environment.
didn't have warp? Are you sure it didn't go into hyperspace? It is bigger than a Star Destroyer, but then again, the Super Star Destroyers had hyperspace travel. Are we sure that
It's possible.
after the, which we haven't gotten to yet, but through the battle against those 4 Sentry ships, he goes into hyperspace to get to Yavin. So therefore, it must have some sort of hyperspace ability to be able to get to Yavin that quickly.
That's logical. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I buy that.
Yep.
So Stealth Nerd 666, by the way, Dad says they love your voice. And House of Moth says we got the Lego Master Host, Star Wars expert, and a new guest. House of Moth, the new guest, is my brother, rocket scientist. Actually, he he goes by the handle HTPB. If you're at all familiar with, which I wasn't. But Todd, what is the HTPB? Rocket fuel?
That's rocket fuels. Hydroxyl terminated polybutadiene. It's basically different. There are different ships that use it as the rocket fuel. If you know what the Pegasus rocket is, it's a aircraft launched rocket that can put things into orbit, and that's the particular fuel that it uses. There are other people that use that as fuel for rocket fuel, but the reason that it came into the shortened HTPB was because my email address when I was going through the space operations courses and things was HTPB Delta V. A Delta V is a thrust, it's a change in velocity. So the actual thing that made any sense was HTPB Delta V, not the change in velocity is a delta V velocity. So HTPB is a shortened version. And they're like, why do you have a call sign as rocket fuel? It's like, well, it's a type of rocket thrust is HTPB Delta V, and it ended up being shortened just to when my gaming login and stuff. When I do that stuff like on Steam and stuff, I just use HTPB as a shortened version of it. Anyway.
Okay, so sorry, but I figured the chat.
Wild aside, having nothing to do with Star Wars.
Yeah, the chat had a side thing. So that was actually quite a few minutes ago that House of Moth had said that. But so we have them getting into the Millennium Falcon. We have them leaving. As Dad said earlier, the backing up and not hurting anybody with the way that the propulsion systems work, not blowing people left and right by the lifting stuff. So now we're out into space and they're attacking the Sentry ships. Something that always got to me every time I see it, and is when Luke is lamenting Obi-Wan's death, and Leia's comforting him. He's all mopey and crap. Han comes up and says, "Come on, kid, we're not. This isn't over yet." And Han goes up into the upper turret, and Luke goes down into the lower turret. And as you're watching it, Han goes up, Luke goes down, and then suddenly, as they start climbing into their chairs, everything turns horizontal. So my question was, Todd, you were just mentioning, are we talking about Star Wars physics in this particular world, this Star Wars world entity? The gravity of the ship keeps them on the floor, but suddenly when they get to the turrets, gravity doesn't matter, because once Luke gets to the bottom, you'd think that the gravity, if the gravity was set in the same way it was before, that he would hit the glass with his face, and Han would be struggling to get into the chair in order to face up. So suddenly these two parts of the Millennium Falcon no longer have the same gravitational pull that the ship does, and it allows for them to now be sideways.
This is the Star Wars physics. Gravity is which way's up of the room that you're in. If you're in that room, then gravity's this way, because I'm in this room, and there's got to be some way to act in the room. So it doesn't matter that the room's over here, and they're sitting in a seat that's strapped in, and from their point of view, down is where their butt is, even though, it's not really. Every room that you're in, gravity is the orientation of how you should act in that room. That's Star Wars. Don't just let it be. That seems to be the
2001: A Space Odyssey. You see the girl in the circular hallway step onto the platform and go completely upside down and around to get off of this thing. She's, the hero is watching this girl who is magnetic shoes holding her in place. We're trying to get used to the fact that you don't need magnetic shoes. All you need is the fact that we need to establish a good camera angle here, and something mysterious is going on that makes them, like Theron said, independent of what gravity was prior to that time, but now independent to the gravity that they were in, now in a different place. I guess you fly the bomber with a nose gunner, knowing that if he crashes, he's got to get the heck out of there. How about a guy that's halfway back along the fuselage? If that airplane crashes, he's going to be torn all to hell. Where are these gun mounts, and why are they not as difficult to handle as they are in our life? There was a climbing down. Chuck Yeager climbing down into the X-1A. You got to go down to get in. You got to reach up and close the lid. Those are real factors in the story of how things happen. He got busted ribs and couldn't close the hatch, so he had to use a sawed-off broomstick that Ridley got him. Those little pieces of the puzzle are going through one's mind, depending on what he's sucked up as historical basis for what he's watching, that drive you to say, they went two different directions, and didn't seem to bother him any. Now, if you didn't have magnetic shoes, would you fall from the ceiling to the floor and break your neck? Well, apparently, depending on where you are, gravity is relative. There's an interesting point to ponder. Is it only because the movie had to have it happen quickly and that was the easy way to do it? Or are we discussing in the minds of the guy that's seeing it his first time, some phenomenal thing going on here that we haven't yet invented. Well, we already talked about hyperspace and warping and so on a little bit, to the point where Einstein said, you're going to diminish the length at which you travel. You are diminishing to nothing. And at one point, you suddenly become energy instead of. How do you even comprehend that? Well,
Well, it's probably a magnitude of the thing which catches your attention. The bigger the magnitude, the more it detracts from the story. The smaller the magnitude, the more it doesn't matter to the story. The fact that this is going on shouldn't make you go, I can't watch the end of this story because I can't figure out how that works in physics, because that's not the way things work in space. And you're falling, and if you can just let it go and go with the story, then that could be explained somehow later, maybe, if someone's very clever and talks about the physics of Star Wars physics. But otherwise, just let it go and just go with the story. It's kind of like, if you ended up making a space movie where they actually did the physics, then you'd be the first person to make a space movie that uses the actual physics of space, because all the Hollywood physics, yeah, if you understand how things move in space, not one of them is
Hollywood physics is all convenience. So like you said, Dad, why would you want to go and try to explain this when we could just let it happen and gloss over it?
Well, maybe the reason why Star Wars is so famous is because the people in space aren't moving in slow motion. If you're in space, you're like, the next thing you know, you're doing a tumble because you just shifted some things around, and then, oh no, we're weightless. We must be moving in slow motion. And Star Wars is like, hey man, this is full speed in space. That's like something I've never seen before. Normally, my pen, you're like floating and stuff. And Star Wars, they don't make you float in space. What the heck? This is awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so
Cricket.
they take out the Sentry X TIE fighters, and then they head off to Yavin. They get to Yavin and start talking about the Death Star plans and bullseyeing Womp Rats and their T-16 back home try to get into the 2-meter hole exhaust port that they're trying to aim for. And then it cuts back to the Death Star, which has now arrived at Yavin and got some interesting things. It says that the moon will be in range in 30 minutes, but if anybody was watching, the timer is actually in seconds, and you see multiple times where the timer cuts down in seconds and milliseconds. It was always one of those points that I'm like, you know what? I love this movie so much, I'm just going to gloss over the fact that this is just silly. But
they paid for the clock scenes before they put the words together that says what time has really expired.
Remember that even seeing a CRT screen that shows you tracking data was like, how many people have seen that? I mean, they didn't have Commodore PET computers widely dispersed when this movie came out. So it's like seeing things, ticking stuff down. It's like, wow, look at all those flashing lights must mean something. Wow, that's a display I've never seen before. This is all science fiction. This is cool stuff. It was pretty new back then. We look at it now and we're like, okay, that's wildly inaccurate, and that's like doesn't make any sense. But when we're watching it, we're just still going, man, oh, look at all this awesome world that's I've never seen anything like it before. So
you're losing on your shirt and your mortgage.
Well, you touched on something when you said about what are they targeting, and you said that it's a small thermal exhaust port right below the main port. The shaft is ray shielded, so you'll have to use photon torpedoes. Okay.
So I
Sure.
guess I'm saying that photon torpedoes have some momentum to them, whereas a laser blast doesn't. You know, but I don't know if I don't want to shift away from your subject, so bring me back in if I wander. But I paid attention to Luke's nonchalant paying attention to the brief the whole time, and he'd never seen the brief before. But he's like, okay, we're gonna shoot this little hole. Okay, I shoot a little hole. I got it. I don't know how to shoot a little hole. And everyone's like, oh, huh? We can't do that. You can't. Who can do that? We can't do that. No one can do that. It's like, no, I do it all the time back home. Oh, it's nothing. I was like, what else you got for me? Just tell me how the brief's gonna end. I'm good. And everyone else is like, this is preposterous. We're going to die and we're not going to win. And he's just like, no, man, just put it in the hole. We know how to put it in the hole. And they're like, Luke thinks we can put it in the hole.
Don't you want to go to your hole?
Let's do that. Let's do what Luke said. Luke said we can do it.
Just like shooting those 6-foot rats we had back home.
They weren't much bigger than 2 meters.
Now all of a sudden, Luke is an expert and he's not lost in the world. He's the only one that gets the world, and everyone else is lost. It's kind of interesting flip flop.
Yeah.
Didn't you guys grow up on a farm? Yeah, we got this. And they're like, I grew up in space. We're gonna die. It's like, no, man, I grew up in a farm. It's just like this. It's like, anyway, that was kind of funny. But I paid attention to Luke's expressions. He's just like, yeah, we're going to do that, put that in the hole. And everyone else is like, what? And Luke's just like, okay, he's just put it in the hole. I don't understand why you're upset. They're like, it was funny. I liked it.
Yeah, Wedge, who's supposed to be the top pilot, and he's the one that's balking at it. And then
well, it seems like you're taking a bunch of fighter jocks and say, this is a bombing mission, right? I know your plane can shoot bombs and laser blasts, but you're a fighter jock. I get it, but you might have to actually use a bomb this time. It's kind of a thing like that. Like Wedge is like, oh, that's impossible. We'll never be able to get that. And it's like, no, maybe if you knew how to use everything that your plane can do, it wouldn't be so hard. But apparently you're just hey, there's the bad guy. Let's shoot the other plane in dogfighting. And it's like, no, you're also got the ability to shoot photon torpedoes too. So maybe it isn't something that comes up every day in a X-wing fighter's job or a Y-wing fighter job to shift roles, but it was a multiple arms approach to. We're going to have to shoot this thing with a photon torpedo. And I know you don't use that every day, but guess what? You're going to use it today or we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Well, that's... go ahead, Dad. I'm sorry.
Seems like our moderator has completed the task.
Yeah, so now all we got to do is finish the conversations that we're having about the movie.
Well, did you demonstrate the... I didn't watch. Were you demonstrating the spreading of the S-foils and back and forth?
Yep.
That's like, I don't know if you ever played with Legos. I played with Legos my whole life, and that's a cool freaking model right there. When we did an innovative build and we made something from scratch, and it was like, oh, dude, that's cool what you did. Those are like aha things that now every time I build with Legos, that's in my toolbox. But I'm telling you, that is a cool model. It isn't every day you figure out the workings of, watch, I just push this and this happens. And you're like, that's epic. That's epic Lego right there. That's not like trivial Lego. That's not like, oh, I've seen expert builder things. They have gears and the gears match. You watch, this one turns and the other one turns. And, it's like, no, it's not like that. Somebody figured out, watch this. You move this lever and it's like, huh? That's cool. That's a cool Lego model. If you don't know Legos, don't discount the fact that that's one of the coolest Lego models you could probably get. So anyway.
So yeah, it's
push for Lego innovation complete.
I think the only thing that is a little weird about this is just how far R2 is actually sitting up out of the out of his little compartment.
Yeah, duck your head, R2. They're shooting at us.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe that's the reason why he got it shot. Come on,
well,
R2.
It's because that's probably an actual R2 too, right? So in previous times, they'd probably just give you an R2 head.
Yeah.
Just put the R2 head on it and make believe that it's actually inside the compartment.
They have the the actual guns, instead of actually having something that shoots, which they've done in the past. Now you just set it in there and then flick it with your finger to shoot it out. Apparently, so when you drop it in here, which
A little
you guys
lower
can't
it a
see,
little.
but you drop it in there, and you have to twist it to the right place. But once you get in there, it's got a little bit of a spring. I'm sorry, it's got a little bit of a spring in there, but yeah, you actually flick it with your finger. Having troubles showing you guys. Let's see. Whoop! I'll find that later. Good thing I got two more.
premature launch.
I have a screen with the Star Wars Despecialized movie on it near me, and I was trying to say, interesting, I didn't look or notice, where did the photon torpedoes come from? Did they come from the tips where the laser blasts normally come from? Is that something we missed, maybe?
I didn't recognize where they came from. So when they actually get into their when they're actually about to get into the X-wings, in the new version, not the despecialized version, new being what 26 years old now. The leader says, "You sure you can handle this?" And Biggs is like, "Oh yeah, this is the best push pilot of whatever." And so it's really Biggs that gives credence to Luke's abilities, despite how arrogantly optimistic he is about being able to shoot a 2 meter hole. So when they actually go on this strike mission, you're looking at Y-wings and X-wings. So the Y-wings are the actual slower, older fighters that were more bomber based, and the X-wings were more of a dogfight style, where they had more maneuverability. So when they go off to fight, it's the Y-wings that are supposed to be taking the initial run, and then
The fighters are just covered.
right, the fighters recover. So then when we get into it and the Y-wings get all destroyed, you have the leader of the Red Squadron goes in to make his run, covered by two people, and then when he fails and it doesn't explode, he's wasted his chance at his photon torpedoes, which apparently they only have then two each, one for each of their wings. So I don't know where it's firing from, but I'd say that's their problem, is they only have two. And then Luke is the one that goes in next. He's their last chance, and he's got Biggs and Wedge as protection, because even though Wedge is the veteran and Biggs has been there longer, Luke is the one that Biggs already said to the Red leader, "No, he's our guy." He must have said something along those lines.
Yeah, maybe it was that the bombers were built to do it, and it was even difficult for them. The fighter has a possibility of doing it, and Luke's the only one who can make that shot if that's possible.
So then you have the fact that the Y-wings, which are slower than the X-wings, actually have a better chance because they're slower, and they're the targeting of it, the actual hand-eye coordination is not going to take as much. Then the X-wing goes in, the X-wing leader, red leader, and he tries at a slower speed. But then you notice Luke actually says, "All right, we're going in to Wedge and Biggs. So we're going in full throttle." So he's actually attempting it at full speed because he wants to try to shake any sort of defense that the TIE fighters and turrets might have against him, that the Y-wings and the X-wings weren't able to get past easily. So he's actually counting on his reaction time, and like I said, he's arrogantly optimistic that he'll be able to do that.
Luke is an amazing adaptive force. He jumped into the Millennium Falcon's gun system, and he's seeing the same kind of thing that the targeting system for his X-wing is showing. I don't know what the complications might have been from shooting one or the other, but when Obi-Wan says, "Get rid of the targeting computer, use the Force," he doesn't even bat an eye about doing that. Now, the thing that he learned how to control on the Millennium Falcon, the targeting device, which is the same picture kind of thing is set up for him, it goes away. Now he is the computerized seeing eye that's necessary to fire that photon torpedo.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's just he learned how to use the sense to sense the blast of the probe that when he was learning how to do the lightsaber with his blast shield down.
Yeah.
You know, with the blast shield down, how am I supposed to find? I can't even see. Well, then he said use the force and learn how to know when to shoot it. Isn't necessarily that he's got some great ability that's been bestowed upon him other than to sense the right moment. You know what I mean? So it may be less technical than you're making it sound. Maybe it's just you'll know when to shoot. You
Well,
know,
the fact that he can compare the X-wing and being able to fly the X-wing to the fact that he had some old militarily type equipment back on the home planet where he shot womp rats. It's like saying I'm going to put a guy from the Eddie Rickety Backers squadron. We're going to throw him out there in a new F-16, F-15, F-18, whatever, and say, here, that's a piece of cake. Well, apparently the basic story, that's all you got to know is, yeah, you can comprehend how to do this. How long did it take to know? Don't know. But it sure brought the story along that he was able to do this. So, yeah, I think part of Lucas's technique was to try and swing us through some of these things at a speed that wouldn't take 4 hours to explain, and get you to the point where, hey, this could be an interesting thing to go forward with. Um, the fact that
it's
Darth
impressive.
almost gets him but doesn't. He corkscrews out of that slot and flies off into deep space. Leaving you hanging. It's
The quality of the story there in that you can have a deep discussion about it. I mean, it's not like a Galaxy Quest where the kids, oh, I'll pull out my schematic. I know the path to go to the chompers and whatever. You know, it's not that kind of a nerdy discussion like that per se. It's more of a, hey, this could be a deeper discussion about things and how it all fits. Might be even beyond what it was originally intended. But that's the quality of an artist. An artist does something that it's on the fringe and he's not sure how to describe it and he doesn't know whether it's truth, but that's what he sees. And people are like, no, I think I see it too. I don't know what I see either, but I think I see it too. And then they all start to say, hey, and then maybe it's one of those, it's on the fringe of, I think you got something there because we all see it too. And we're all trying to figure it out. And there's some depth there. And he just kind of knocked that one out of the park, but it's creative people on the front leading edge of, I don't think I could do this on paper, but it sure would be cool if we could do that. And it's like, wow, he's a visionary. He's like, that's cool. And then it turns out that, yeah, you can talk about it for 4 hours. So that was good job. You did a good job.
Yeah, I think I probably had the more interesting way of approaching watching the movie in the fact that in part one, we explained that I'm a father trying to decide what it is I'm bringing my kids to and what are they being exposed to. And where do I come from? Well, I come from a particular science fiction background that says, huh? How can you explain that? Oh, wait, well, okay. For the sake of the story, we'll go beyond that. But in the mind, you're saying, oh, he did a similar thing here, but okay. In the long run, the story comes through quickly the way he said it was going to come and achieves what he wanted it to do. It's got you looking for the next one. And a lot of people talking about well, what did it really mean when this happened? So uh, it was a pivotal piece of filmmaking that had it's like Top Gun. Top Gun drove a lot of guys to want to get into the Navy to be pilots. Well, I don't know what A New Hope was expected to be, but it paved the way for a lot of some interesting science fiction to follow, all based on his being able to get past this hurdle of absorb some of this stuff, put your thought processes on a hold, grab hold of this concept as the reason why, and keep on going, because eventually you may find all the answers. But if not, it'll make you interested in maybe finding some of these things in your own real world.
I like the way that um, a composer of music will lead you to the climax of it, which will give you the goosebumps kind of thing. And the way the story was presented, I think it was written and presented for the person seeing it for the first time to be led to a jubilant, goosebumpy moment at the end that makes R2D2 go, this is cool, yay. When we went to see that movie with Dad and Brian, um, it was a sold out movie from some convention that was going on, and they all had all the tickets, and it was like there was no room in that theater. And it wasn't just because it was Star Wars, it was because those guys didn't have anything else to do that day because they were there for a convention and we're doing a movie. Whatever it was, that room was packed. And at the end, everyone was like cheering and standing up. And I'm like, I don't know if this is what movies are like because I'm so young, but I guess this is what a good movie's like because everybody's cheering and everyone seems to be happy at the end of the movie and jubilant. And we look at it after the fact and go, oh, yeah, we could pick apart the technicals of this movie. But when you were seeing it for the first time, it was written for you to see it for the first time and have these wows and have the ooh and have the, well, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And that's what it was written for. And I think you did a great job of that because the first time I saw it, the entire audience was basically standing up with standing ovation. And I've never seen that since. I haven't been to a movie theater to see that since. I mean, I've been to Top Gun and seen it in the theater, and people were like, yeah, no, no, no. And the guys on the flight deck are going, yeah. And you look at it now, and it's like the moron on the flight deck going, yeah. And it's like that's the stupidest thing. That's the most embarrassing shot in the whole movie. Go, we did it, But when we were in the theater for the first time watching it, it was like, yeah, that was cool, man. Yeah, we win. Yeah, you R2D2 shake. It was cool. And I thought he did a great job with that for the first time viewer to. And the same thing with The Matrix. You watch The Matrix now, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But when you were watching for the very first time, you were discovering and figuring things out. And, oh, I called that. Or, wow, that was a really cool twist. I didn't even see that coming. That was what it was written for. It wasn't written for the person who saw it 4 times. It was written for the person who watched it for the first time. So you have to take it in that context when you talk about it, that we're picking this apart with all the knowledge of all the movies after the fact, and we still think it's a good movie. But when we saw it for the very first time, that's who it was written for. It was written for us the very first time to lead us into a place that brought you to do the R2D2 shake at the end and go, oh, yay. It's like, dude, I'm going to go see that again, And I might see it 7 times, but I still remember when I saw it the first time, which is why I can see it 7 times. Otherwise, you'd be like, well, maybe it's not worth seeing it 7 times. But it is when it reminds you of the feeling you had the first time you saw it, when it brought you to that climax of, yes, we freaking win. Yeah, we win.
Well, Todd, one of our one of the guys we have in the chat, Eric Sedge, mentioned during the first one is that he saw it 14 times in the theater.
Yeah, well, I watched.
But what I'm saying is like it was that impactful. You're like, wow, and it really was. I wish I could have seen it a whole lot more times, but obviously, I mean, we're talking about 70s. Was expensive to take a family to go see it, a family of 5 to go see it, multiple times. I'm surprised. I think we saw it. You guys must have seen it 3 times. I saw it twice in the theater, I think.
I don't know. In the theater, probably. But we saw Empire and Return a lot more. Like when you watch Clerks 2 and they're like, how many times have you seen Lord of the Rings? Well, 7 for Fellowship and, not 9 for Towers and 6 for Return of the King, and they're like, you guys are nerds. And it's like, no, you don't understand. You get something from that movie that sparked something in there that you was exciting, and you can touch that again if you go to see it again. And the cool thing about getting old and having kids that are now out of the house, or mostly out of the house, I got one left, but is you can start understanding that there are feelings you can feel that will bring up emotions that you don't show when you're like when you're young and those aren't things you see. But now things bring a tear to my eye more than they ever did because they mean more in retrospect to everything else in the universe that I've experienced. That's very meaningful, and that's why I watch movies. I know which movie I want to watch because yeah, I want to watch that because I like that feeling I get when that scene happens. And it doesn't mean, I mean, I know the story. I've watched it 14 times, but every time I do it, I'm like, yep, that's the feeling I had when I watched that movie. I like that. And that's why you see these things multiple times. It's not because I want to see something I hadn't seen before because I wasn't really paying attention. There's some of that, but some of it is I want to relive the feeling that it gave me when that happened. And it doesn't take a lot. I just have to rewatch it. I'm not going to watch it half-ass while I'm cooking macaroni and cheese because I won't get that feeling. I'm going to sit down and watch this movie front to start for the 7th time because right at that moment you're like, oh yeah, that's why I like that movie. It's the same reason I saw it the first time, or liked it the first time.
That's that's what Eric said just in the chat. Has basically said, yep, when he 14 times when he was a kid. He says you have to remember that we had reruns of Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, and not much else. And he said he spent his weekly allowance that summer on that movie. So to that point, he said exactly to your point, Todd. He said it's that feeling is the reason why he did it. So yeah, it was a great movie. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around it.
Well, I think that
made a lot of people feel things.
There's an audience of people that have no connection to movies the way we're talking about. They just go, yeah, it was entertaining. Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I saw it. Did you watch it again? No, I mean, I saw it once. I don't remember the lines or anything. It's like, dude, really? What a waste. Really? Is that how you go through life? You don't want to find yourself in a situation that you could imagine you might be in, and where does that lead you? If you're so shallow, I don't even get it. It's kind of like, I feel sad for those people that can't have a library of movies and they know why they like each one in it. And when they want to get that kind of feeling, that's the movie they pick. Haven't you already seen that 7 times? Yeah, I have. But that's what I want to feel right now. And I'm going to watch that because it reminds me how I feel. And it reminds me, it's my library of what do you feel like today? Well, I feel like having a battle that you can't win, that you're going to die, but it's the right thing to do, and you're going to put it out there, and maybe you will win, And that's the feeling I want today, so that's why you watch it.
Well, what you've told me before is that's why you watch horror movies, and it doesn't matter how many times you see the same one. You love that jump scare because you get yourself so involved in whatever story you're watching that you're in full feeling mode. You're in full, you're immersing yourself in the stimuli of what you're listening to and watching, and if you have enough tunnel vision to be able to do it, the entire world disappears and you become part of the scenery watching what's happening, and that jump scare is what really
it's different for everybody, but for horror movies the jump part gets me. The build. He looking at the mirror and something's gonna, and then nothing happened, but he turns and there it is, and it's like, damn, I thought it was over, I thought we got past it, but then you look, then there it is. That's the kind of thing that if you like that, or that's your trigger, then that's why you like that kind of a movie. I like the ones the pit of your stomach going, oh shit, when the bad guy looks in and goes, and you're like, oh man, that's the kind of thing that I like. So when I watch a horror movie that has it in, it's kind of like the true evil of the characters all of a sudden is like, and you're like, oh shit, that's what I like, and that's why I watch those movies. I watch those for that. There's a lot. I mean, that's why I like this venue, because you can hear why people like a movie, and you can go, I like it for that reason too. I just could never articulate it. I'm so glad you said that because I didn't. Well, when you talk about it enough times, because you're trying to convince someone, no, you need to see this movie because of this, and they're like, oh, I didn't look at it that way before. Well, watch it again because it's like, yeah, you're right. I feel that way too. And so that's why this is cool, because you get to find out. I never even really thought about that. The next time I watch it, what a deeper experience I'll have, because now I understand how that made you feel. And I agree with that. And I'm going to feel that next time too. And it'll even be better the next time you watch it because of all that. So
I think you go to things that contributed to it. I think one of the things that contributed most for me was John Williams. His
as Todd was saying about the music, it's just if you got the wrong composer, the movie it might not even help you. Careful on how much you do there, Dad. You get copyrights if you end up getting the tune exactly right.
Magnificent Seven. A lot of these movies had the music that drove the song, and it's just you didn't pay attention too much. Your body was bumping up and down to the rhythm or something. Was part of what made the story work.
Well, so we have no idea what music means or how it, like, why is it that we're rapt when it sit there and you have na 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 na, and you're like, holy cow, where did that come from? You were stuck in the quiet, peaceful moment where the dear lips touch the water, and all of a sudden something happens. The music leads you to dun dun dun, this is a bad guy. Now I feel that the evil of him just from the music, and it adds such a depth to everything to have. This is the Princess Leia song. It's the happy, it's Princess Leia, and then you've got Darth Vader's always got the Darth Vader music. That, I don't know how much that happened before that. In a Western, was there always the hero music when there's a hero and there's a dun, 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 there's a bad guy?
Sometimes, but not always.
Well, yeah. It intrudes in our way of reacting to our world, and that once we've been affected by that, we now are quoting it. We are seeing pictures in our mind and comparing it to heard of or whatever. I'm a cartoon nut, and I like Lockhorns. And Leroy, seeing his mother-in-law coming up the front porch, says, "Cue the Jaws theme." We find this as built in a piece of us. Whether we believe it or not, it's part of what became part of who we are. Somebody put it in front of our visual, oral sensors, and now it's become part of us. I think that was one of the big ones.
It's cool because there can be theme music for something good's going to happen too. Like when Batman's on the way to do the next great thing, it's like da 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 da. Here he comes. Da, 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 da. Here comes the hero. So you got the here comes the hero music. It's not Batman's theme. It's the here comes the hero music. And I think John Williams did such a great score that he tied the right themes to what was happening, so that he could draw you into the same feeling from the previous scene by giving you the same music. Or like when you're wandering around the desert and there's Jawas, it's like, you don't know what's going on. And every time you're in that desert scene and you have that, you're in that same place again. You're in the place of, it's just kind of R2-D2 walking through the desert, whatever it is. And so when he assigns the Death March, every time you hear the Death March, everything that you remember about who gets the Death March comes with the music, without the actor even having to do anything except say, that's a Death March guy. Listen, you hear that? He's a bad guy too. You didn't have to develop the guy as no bad guy. He's a bad guy because he's got Death March music.
Well, he made the music and the whole score very operatic, and actually Eric's Edge was commenting it's a space opera in the best sense of the style, and that's one of the factors that made Star Wars what it is, and it is a perfect space opera. A lot of that has to do with the score giving you that extra push. Yeah, he did make it a very operatic score. The way that he approached it.
And the triumphal parade ceremony music when they get in the medals is everybody knows what that means. That means the good guys won. That means we're all happy that, hey, we're on the winning team, and so that's all good.
Yeah, the end fanfare was very cool.
Well, everybody walked out of the theater smiling because the music for the fanfare was still playing as you're walking out of the theater. You left you
Oh, do
left
you?
on that high note, and as you're walking out and putting your trash in the trash bin or leaving it by your seat, the triumphant music still playing. So you take it with you. Hey, that was a great movie. I feel good because I felt good at the last moment, and I still feel that as I'm walking out to my car.
Back when leaving the theater during the end credits was still okay. Now you have to sit there and watch through the credits to see the special scenes
I
that they
think
throw in there.
musically that's horrible because they always touch on all the different songs that were throughout the movie during the credits because these credits are long and I can't just have the triumphant march play until the end of the credits. So we'll go back to all the different things we talked about, and you're just ruining the climax because now you're revisiting stuff that's not the climax. So when you're watching the credits, you're not going to walk away to your car with the ceremony triumphant music in your head because you went back to the death march thing because we're like 15 minutes into the credits and you got to play something. So let's play the death march again. And you just ruined the end of the movie because the end of the movie was, the jubilant thing that you're supposed to take with you for the next week. I'm good to go because I saw Star Wars on Sunday and I can't wait till next weekend because I'm going to go see it again. No, not you got the Jawa music playing at the end of the credits, and it's like now I'm not there anymore. Now I'm in the Jawa music thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So maybe it's a disservice for the person not to hear Thunderstruck or the Iron Man AC/DC music as you're leaving the theater because then when you're going out to your car singing the Iron Man DC music or the AC/DC music as you're going to your car. Don't screw that up by playing some other thing that was in the movie.
that's
You just
actually
ruined.
that's actually a real good point. That the taking it and making it a medley at the end of whatever was in the movie. You're right. Definitely would take you out.
Well,
Eric
so
Tedge actually says, "True, but you get all the feels over again." Hold on, wait. I waited until the lights came up, and then true. Are we talking about? Oh, you actually stayed through all of the credits. I don't mind staying through the credits. When the theme is good or when I don't like waiting for scenes to pop up. I think that's something that should be, if you're going to throw it as an appendix at the end of the movie, throw it on the end of the movie. Don't insist that people watch through some credits
yeah,
before throwing
it was
something else
cute.
in there.
It was cute when Ferris Bueller did it. Let's
Well,
get past it.
right at the
What
very
are
end,
you? Why
it says, "What are you still doing
are you
here?
still
Go,
here?
go
This thing's
home."
over. Go get a sandwich or something.
But in this case, where it's almost like it's too much of a tease for whatever they have coming next, and it was cute when they, to your sort of to the same point as Ferris Bueller's, it was cute and novel when they did it for the first couple of times, but now it's just it's not really a fan service as much as they're just stroking their own egos and saying this is what we have coming up next, and you're going to have to see this. And I was like, well, maybe not. Maybe
Well,
I don't care anymore. Maybe you're
popcorn and cups never got picked up before like they do now because I got to do something while I'm waiting for the end scene. When all the credits are done, I might as well pick up this popcorn and I'll take this with me to the trash because I got to wait for the end scene anyway. And then the end scene comes, and I bet the people cleaning up the theater loved the end scene in there because people had 5 to 10 minutes to try and figure out what to do with what they did. Oh, Lord, I made a mess. I better fix that, because they had to look at it while they're waiting for the cut scene at the end.
Todd. You're a huge Deadpool fan. Eric Edge just said that he said it was cool when Deadpool did it and copied him. That was copying the Ferris Bueller scene. Is that what it was at the end?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, Ryan Reynolds. So here's why Dad was talking about our generation quotes these movies all the time, and it's just a different thing. I've got a guy at work where I'll drop a line from a movie that I know probably he's seen, and we'll laugh for 15 minutes because he knew exactly what I meant because I said that at that moment. And there's people like, oh, I saw that movie. Oh, yeah. And it's like, dude, you're missing out on life because I'm sharing um, Jamal and Tarmac when the sky fell. Like everything you talk about when you give a quote is to remind people of what happened when the sky fell. And I don't even know if
And
that's
it's not just the quote, but Eric is agreeing with you 100% on this, Todd. And it's not just the quote that you're quoting, though. To your point, it's because you watched it and you were feeling the movie at that time. It's the feeling of what you're saying on top of the fact you're quoting the movie because that's the point you're trying to get across. And
yeah.
you're
And
right.
what
And
so
you
what
have
Ryan
people.
Reynolds in Deadpool does is he drops those one-liners, and we're all like, I like his humor because I know what he's doing because I do that too. That's how I express myself is to say, remember in this movie with that? Oh yeah, we laugh. And that's what I mean. There are so many references to 80s and beyond that Ryan Reynolds drops in his movies that most people are like, yeah, it wasn't written for you. I'm laughing at it. It was written for me. You just watch your movie, eat your popcorn, and do whatever you do. I don't know.
Yeah,
My generation ran into that, and I'm getting a bad feeling about this. It's crazy how many things showed up. You'd be in a serious meeting someplace, General Electric, and doing this stuff, and all of a sudden somebody said, I'm getting a bad feeling about this. And everybody kind of looked and said, what did we miss? What's been going on here? Somebody's got something going on. And everybody kind of comes, yeah, we all understood the line. Now, what the heck does it mean? Why did it come up in this conversation? So sometimes our generation used it as a throwaway line, got some people's interest, but we weren't, it didn't go as deeply as far as I can tell in my generation as much as, yeah, it was amazing that they did remember some of those lines.
Well, I mean, you could. There's 50 million reasons why you could. Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? And if you knew the reference and you think that was hilarious, that was brought up at that time and applied to a different situation, because you just got the. Are you? It's funny. I love quoting movies because if the person that you're talking to knows what you're talking about, you're talking a language that everyone else in the room can't even understand, maybe, or maybe they do, but they're not very good at it, or it's a deeper level of communication because we're sharing more in the words than just the words. We're sharing everything that comes along with everything about when that word was used.
We were there, man. We both saw it.
and it's the sharing of the experience, not the words, but like you said, Todd, it gives you that much more of a communication with the person you're talking to. Eric just says,
Well,
what is your quest?
I heard about this last night when we pulled that all-nighter, which he kept me awake while I was doing something I had to do for our barbecue butt sale thing. And now I lost my complete train of thought. Well, I had a good point, and then I had to explain why I was getting to that point, and now it's gone. I don't know why I'm in this room. I came into the refrigerator for something, but I don't remember what it is. It'll come back to me in a second, maybe. I don't know what I was going to say. It's lost. What was I thinking, Terry?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm reading Eric's chats as well. Some call me Tim.
Yeah. Some people call me Tim. I like. I mean, so when Monty Python movies were introduced to us, it was in the 80s, and the Mathletics Club had a movie thing at the high school, so everyone could come and watch a Mathletics movie, and they'd have a fundraiser by selling candy that you could throw across the theater to hit somebody in the head with. I don't even know if I did, but I just throw it back there because that's what you did, but I was exposed to Monty Python in that way. And you're exposed to something a lot of people aren't exposed to. And if you could quote a movie that not everyone knows, then the ones who get it, and they're all in on it. And the ones who don't, it just wasn't for you. And I'm okay with that,
Yeah, it's the secret handshake club. It's if you don't know it, you don't know it. But you definitely have a cool feeling when you are one of the people in the know. You're like, I got that.
Well, I mean, it's telling about the quality of a show, perhaps, and maybe we're getting way off topic now. But when I mean, my daughter's watched Grey's Anatomy probably 7 or 8 times through the entire series. She knows everything about it, but I've never heard her make a reference to it in a conversation. Like, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? There aren't any lines that are epic, so maybe that's the depth of it, is just the entertainment of it, but not necessarily a defining moment that everybody shares where you could say, oh, remember when you pulled that grenade out of that guy's stomach? It's just like that. There just isn't the depth that some of these things have.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, I don't like to toot your horn too many times, but this is a great idea. I mean, the ability to talk about the perspectives that the movie generates in different people and different generations of different people. It's a really good idea.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I can get some people involved in this. I'm hoping that Eric's Edge would be interested in dropping in a couple of times, and I've got some other friends that I've already approached, and
I keep joining the chat room because you'll be invited as one of the guests because you got stuff to say, and we want to hear what you have to say too.
Yeah, and I think that I'm going to try to gear as much as I can the movies that I bring people on specifically for the video to who have a draw to it, like an actual, they have something that they would like to contribute to the conversation, and they have a certain perspective about it that they want to express to maybe don't get that opportunity, like people at work or your family just doesn't get it quite the way you do. Maybe Monty Python's not quite their style, but you really love it above everything else, and maybe that would be a good movie to
well, there could be different things you go there to see. Some guys are, you go to the arts awards and they're giving an award for the amount of garden work that was done as background of these different movies. So, and they compared them. Well, that movie had a real jungle scene that was like, it's difficult to have. Different people go there for different reasons. And even Academy Awards is saying, hey, it's how you dress the people. I don't care how their acting is. The guy will tell you if it ain't the actor, you don't have anything going on. Everybody's got their own picture of what to expect and are surprised for various reasons.
So I remembered what my train of thought was, by the way.
Oh, cool. Go for it.
What you're saying. So we were talking last night then when we stayed up all night, and I won't distract myself from what I'm trying to say again so much that I can't remember what I'm saying. But we were talking about, this is my plug for Jordan Peterson. You need to look at Jordan Peterson's videos. It's amazing. His brain is working in so many ways you can't even keep up with it. But he analyzed Pinocchio and he analyzed The Lion King to his psych, basically his psych class in those psych 300, psych 400 level courses. And if you want to understand the meaning of what's going on in the movie and why you react while you do in that scene, why is this scene important? Because this is what it's tapping into. This is why, that's what that means. If you want to learn that kind of, the Lion King and the Pinocchio analysis from Jordan Peterson, and it'll open up your eyes, and maybe it'll open up the eyes of people who don't see why these movies are so meaningful and why the successful ones are meaningful and the ones that aren't successful aren't, because what they have and what they don't have. And why is that? Because that's one of those archetypal storylines. The hero going out to slay that's what you do. You kill the dragon. You don't sit there and go, stay away from that cave. There's a dragon in there. That's not a hero story. The hero story is, I might die, but the treasure's in there, and I got to rescue the virgin that's in there, and that's what heroes do. So here I go. I hope I don't die, but this is what I got to do, and that resonates with people, and they don't know. So when you see a movie that has that storyline, you're like, I don't know why I like that movie, but I like it. You want to know why you like it? Start to understand what the meaning of some of this stuff is. So here's my pitch. Go watch the Jordan Peterson videos for The Lion King and Pinocchio, and it will make you look at the whole world in a different way. And you'll be like, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it does. It's really cool.
That reminds
That's
me
what
of
I was trying to think of.
yes, very cool points. That reminds me of a TV show that happened, I think, in the late '80s called. I just had it in my head too. It had a character named Captain Justice, maybe called Once a Hero, maybe. It had a character named Captain Justice and had another character that was a gumshoe, and they were actually from a comic book world. And to your point, you were saying how the character had to do it. Why do you have to do it? Because that's what you do when you're that type of character. Well, the gumshoe character was very Sam Spade type noir, and he his partner had died and had been killed, and he says, "Well, I got to go after the guy who got my partner." Says the question was why? Because that's what you do. You go after the guy that gets your partner. Why? I don't know, because that's just what you do. It's like, but to your point,
apparently you know nothing about
Sam
nothing about having a partner. Apparently,
right. But it was
may not have,
sorry, go ahead.
it may not have been the best partner, but you don't let anybody take on your partner.
So in a comedic way, it was saying what you were saying though, Todd, is because that's what you do. That's what the story needs. That's where you go next.
That's why you know when people are bent. When they say stuff that you know is not right, it's because no, you think in this moment that you're right because of this, but this is why you're wrong. That's not. That's not right. There's meaning to things, and we have meaning, and we have things that are established, morality and stuff that it's epic. It's been going on a long time. It's been established for thousands of years of people, and you don't even know that the people who are in line with the established are more likely to thrive and reproduce, and so their offspring have whatever circuit was in their head which said he's going to do well because he's in line with everybody else, and so you're almost wired to be where we're at in evolution of our traditions because everyone's who is in line with that has successfully reproduced, and the people who aren't in line with it aren't going to successfully reproduce because they're not going to be in the main line. So you're actually been changed genetically because of human behavioral evolution has made you who you are. Where
They're
you
the guys. They're the guys that never went in the cave. That had fallen by the way.
Anyway,
Is that what you said?
Stealth
Well,
Nerd
the
six
thing to
six
do is
six.
to go in the cave. Some of the guys that didn't go in the cave, they're the ones that are gone by the. Anyway, okay.
they didn't accomplish anything.
Stealth
They
Nerd
didn't
666
rescue the
says he
people
also
in-
likes Jordan Peterson, Todd. He says Jordan Peterson's great. And Jen just got on. She says, hello, guys. Just got home and ate real quick. Love you, Dad. Love you, Todd. And love you, Eric.
Hi, dear.
Love
I think it was interesting that Darth Vader was the one that said, I see your lack of faith is very disturbing. You know, and the guy didn't, whatever the story is.
I find your lack of depth disturbing. Your lack of understanding about, are you really that dense? Okay, well, your opinion doesn't matter. You don't get it, obviously.
as I force choke the crap out of you because trusting your head, crush.
I force choke you. I force choke you.
All right. Well, we're at a little over 2 hours, so we can Any last bits of wisdom on the movie, or any last comments that anybody is interested in putting out there? Anybody in the chat have anything that they want to contribute, and we can talk about that real quick before we sign off.
Ribbons matter. Ribbons matter. If you're
Ribbons
gonna have a
matter.
medal, you have a good ribbon too. I'm just saying, ribbons matter.
To that point, actually, I've been watching Babylon 5, and again, multiple times I've seen it, but there's a episode where Sheridan is finally out of his duty uniform, and he's actually in a dress uniform, and the medals, the ribbons that he has on his chest, they pop. Like, you can tell that this was a decorated hero. And to Todd's point, where you don't have that in a bland outfit, you don't get the same feeling that this guy knows what he's doing, and he's a hero.
Well, here's your military education for the day: is you can't walk around with a chest full of ribbons and your medals flopping around every time you wear a uniform. So the abbreviation for it is the ribbon which goes with that medal. It looks like this, and no other ribbon for that medal, for another medal, exists. They're all unique ribbons to go with the medal, so that you can just put a little, hey, I see that ribbon, I see that you got that medal. And you don't have to have these big floppy medals everywhere every time you go anywhere, because you have the abbreviation. So, hey, you saved the universe. Have an olive drab ribbon. How's that? Hey, I see you saved the universe. I see your olive drab ribbon, So I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but it's just not right. It's just not right. Someone screwed that up.
Well, yeah, the episode was the In the Shadow of Zahadum, I think is what it was. It was in the second season, the toward the end. But it was just, you knew what the character's background was and everything, but it was just, it made that much of an impact to see on that uniform. It's like, yeah, you know what? It definitely does make a difference. Stealth Nerd 666 he wants to know what next movie is going to be, and can we please do an episode on Babylon 5. I am actually interested in Babylon 5. I was creating and I'm going to try to create the minifigs for the main characters, which means I'm going to have to try to probably Sculpey the Minbari bonehead and Lando's head and hair, as well as the reptile look of Jakar. But yeah, I'm interested in doing that. So definitely, I will be doing B5. Hopefully, sometime soon. You were going to say something, Todd?
Well, I was saying, just because we're doing this with kits that exist, because it's a good premise for you to do something while we're talking about the movies, you could, with your building skills from a lifetime of playing with Legos, you make a Babylon 5 model out of Legos. Now you write down how you did that so that you can do it again while we're talking about Babylon 5. But guess what? Hey, I made this Babylon 5 model. What do you think? Oh my God, that looks just like a Babylon 5 model. Yeah, I've been building for a while. I think I can figure it out. And I did it right in front of you while we were talking about Babylon 5. It doesn't have to be something Lego came up with. It could be something you come up with, because you can build a Babylon 5 model. I know you can. You've got a lot of Legos. You could figure it out,
Yeah, and I will be getting into that kind of thing too. First, I'll go through and do the minifigs, and then work on probably the ship, work on their fighter ships, and go on from there. As far as what movie I may do next, excuse me, I was thinking from Star Wars I would jump to fantasy and actually do Harry Potter, which Eric's Edge had mentioned earlier, that the feeling, Todd, that you and Dad and I get from watching Star Wars, his kids get from watching and reading Harry Potter. So I'm thinking maybe I'll jump to Harry Potter and maybe do. Now the castle's huge. The first one that I have is really, really cool. And I also have one from The Prisoner of Azkaban, but I'd probably want to start with the Sorcerer's Stone / Philosopher's Stone. But that may be the next one I do. I'm not quite sure, but I will talk to some friends and see who wants to join me on that, and may even be my dad and my brother as well that would be interested in coming on. And I'm not adverse to having more than just two people. I think though that trying to keep the conversation from meandering too far away, having a couple of guests makes for a good panel to discuss. So I don't know. We'll see. Anybody have anything else to say on the chat? This would be the time. And what, Todd?
I was going to say Hollywood Squares. You get
Right.
the
All 9 people.
Everyone has their role, and the comments come, and when the comments come, you know what that one's going to do. You know.
Charles Nelson Riley, always the comedian. Who was the one that was always in the center? I can't remember. I can't remember if that was. They all had their place because of what their personalities and their comments would be.
The guy who was the voice of the rat in Charlotte's Web, wasn't he the one that was always in the middle?
Yeah, crap. What was his name? Now you got me trying to figure out.
Well, I always voted for Richard Dawson, so that was a slightly different thing. But yeah, they had their way of drawing a crowd.
Well, their twisted humor was the answer they had to the clue that makes people go, "Did you just say that out loud?" You know, it's like it was the front leading edge of what you could get away with on TV. That was some funny stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, while Terry's looking that up.
Templeton, Paul Lind. Yep, Jen said Paul something. It's Paul Lind, Lynde.
Yes. Paul Lind. Yep.
Yeah, and they all had their specific personalities that made that particular spot in the squares that much more interesting.
So now, Terry, you have to solve the how can you merge all these ideas into one show? Hey, circle gets a square over there, Dad. Good job. You know,
right. make the
tic-tac-toe board. So by the end of this thing, the people that, hey, that was a good comment, you get an X. You know, and hey, it looks like the X's win this one. Good job, X's. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, Charles was Eric's Edge. Charles, I think I just mentioned his, didn't I? Charles Nelson Riley. Unless you're talking about Charles something else. You said Charles O something. Anybody else remember Charles from that? Other than Charles Nelson Riley? I don't know. Anyway, so yes, I'm interested in doing more. Hopefully, you guys are interested in listening to more. Definitely had a good time. Again, any last thoughts from Dad and Todd before we sign off? And I'll try to figure out some way to tell you guys what I'm thinking next.
Well, you can't. You just got to remember that Star Wars was one of those movies that had the iconic scream of the stormtrooper.
Ah!
We didn't talk about that at all, but I just thought that you need to go out on a good note here, you guys. Anyway, that's all I got. I don't got anything else.
All right. I guess I'm done. Stealth Nerd says Charo. Charo, I can't remember how often Charo might have shown up on.
Coochie coochie.
You guys get a little shot the studio here. I'm actually broadcasting.
The magic behind the curtain.
Yeah, the magic behind the curtain. I'm actually broadcasting these guys into the screen, and then I have a separate camera, which you see right here, which is pointing down so that I have enough views of the Lego. So anyway, thank you so much for
his hand back. No.
The hand in the back of my head that's actually moving my mouth.
That's how he's making our mouths move over there. If you'd be able to show that part.
I find the arm up my butt kind of uncomfortable, but I have the same problem. Maybe I just.
You see the X-ray,
Here we
the
go.
X-ray of Kermit the Frog. He's got a hand inside him.
All right. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you tune in again. If you like the video, please hit like. If you want to hear more, hit the subscribe and then hit the bell for reminders. I'm not sure why. I couldn't find out why the reminder wasn't telling me ahead of time that this one was coming up. I did have it scheduled as of yesterday afternoon, so I'm not quite sure what was going on with that. I'll try to figure that out. But in the meantime, you guys have a good time, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Thank you so much, guys. All right.
All right.
Take care,
Tasty
everyone.
lumbago.